Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. Welcome everyone. In a different room of my house today as I'm renovating my office, but it'll just be for a couple of weeks. But I have a fun one for you today, or at least this was a fun video for me to make. Hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. Recently, a viewer, Alex, wrote in with the idea regarding my time machine catchphrase. Say you were given $100,000 in 2020 right before the boom. What would you invest in knowing what you know now to make as much money as possible? What cards would you buy? Would they all be the same? How much money do you think you have made? And I thought this was just a really fun activity, so I decided to make a video out of it. I'm imagining I can go back in time to January 1st, 2020. I have $100,000 to spend on sports cards, and I retain everything I know about what happens in the hobby over these years, and I want to see how much money I can turn that $100,000 into by present day. And I made a couple rules for the game, otherwise this would get way out of control. One, I can only buy and sell my entire budget and inventory twice. So on January 1st, I can spend the $100,000, then I have to sell it all on one date. And then using the money that I made from the sale, I can do that one more time. And I have to state the dates up front that I'm going to sell them. Like, so if when I buy the cards, I have to state the date up front. Okay, I'm going to sell them on this date. I'm not going to just track the cards along and say, okay, I'll sell them at the peak, because in reality, I probably wouldn't know what the peak is, on most of these cards. Only going to be working with cards that transact a decent amount. Like I was originally thinking, I'll just buy PMGs. Those all went way up, but the PMGs just don't transact very much, so it'd be very difficult to sort of get, a fair market value of them at any sort of moment in time. But, to start the game, I went back to January 1, 2020. I looked at only prices there. I did not look into the future. I was trying really hard not to cheat, which I think I accomplished. But let's see how I did. And just as a quick tease, your boy crushed it. All right, so going back to January 2020, I decided I want to diversify my portfolio a little bit. As well, 2020 is when the major boom occurred for COVID, and into early 2021. So this part should be pretty easy, the first buy and sell anyway. And I was, doing the weekly high rollers, so I was pretty familiar with it back then. But obviously got to get a Jordan rookie. We'll get an 86 Fleer Michael Jordan PSA 10. They were selling for around $38,000 on January of 2020. Now I know they got up to like 800,000, but I have no idea when that date was, and I don't know. So I don't know. I don't know the peak of this card. But yeah, we're gonna buy a Jordan rookie for our portfolio at $38,000. LeBron had already started to spike, but we're gonna get one of his 2003 Topps Chrome refractors, also in a PSA 10. This card was selling for roughly $13K or so around January 2020. So we'll say the Jordan was 38, the LeBron was 13. So already halfway through my budget. Patrick Mahomes, I don't think had really spiked just yet. We'll get some of his 2017 Panini Prisms PSA 10s. When I went back, they were actually only $800 in January of 2020. So I decided to buy 5 of them, $4,000 put into Patrick Mahomes. Had to include some vintage. I know this card spiked heavily. 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. Went with a PSA 2. PSA 2s were going for, well, we'll say 21,000 or so in January of 2020. I know the 51 Bowman spiked as well. It may have even spiked more, but I feel like it was later. I wasn't quite sure the exact dates, but added a PSA 3. By the way, that's a really nice looking 3. Just as a side note. But yeah, PSA 3 Mantle, they were going for about $8,000 or so in January of 2020. Luka Doncic was obviously sort of one of the poster childs of the COVID boom. I wasn't sure if he was sort of a little earlier. He might have boomed more in 2019, but his Silver Prizm PSA 10 was only going for about $1,500, so added 2 of those to the portfolio. That's $3,000 spent on Luka Doncic. I know vintage basketball had a massive spike, but I feel like it was kind of a little bit later, but probably later in 2020. So I wanted to add 1 card there. 72 Topps Julius Erving, PSA Mint 9 Dr. J rookie. This was going for about $5,000 in January of 2020. So we'll add 1 of those to the portfolio. And then the Gretzky spiked heavily. You can see a lot of the all-time iconic cards on here, as a lot of those really spiked in the 2020-2021 era. So 79 OPC Wayne Gretzky rookie, PSA 8. They go for about $4,000, meaning to round out my budget, I could afford 2 of them. $8,000 spent on Wayne Gretzky. So here's the full portfolio for round 1. Ended up being 14 cards in total. And I was very confident on all these purchases. Like, I was very confident that all of these would go up heavily in 2020 and early 2021. I decided for my sale date to be April 1st, 2021. And I just know because I did so many high rollers back then that the very peak of the COVID boom was sort of late March, early April, and then things started to decline after that. So I figured April 1, 2021 would be the right sale date for all these cards. Here's the list of the purchase prices. You can see it added up to $100,000 on the nose. Obviously, we're sort of rounding things here, but basically $100,000 spent for these 14 cards on January 1, 2020. All right, jumping ahead 15 months. It's now April 1st, 2021. I'm going to sell the cards. Let's see how we did. 1986 Fleer, Michael Jordan, PSA 10. Currently is going for about $450,000. Remember, I paid $38K. That's more than a 10x return on the Jordan. The LeBron, which we paid $13 for, is now going for about, we'll say, $150K. So again, more than a 10x return on LeBron. Patrick Mahomes, which we paid $800 a piece, got 5 of them. They're currently going for about $10,000 a piece. So again, more than a 10x return on that. The 52 mantle, which we paid $21K for. It's actually this one not as big a return. It's still well up. It's going. We'll say it's going for about $35,000 or so. So from 21 to 35 as of April 2021. The 51 Bowman mantle, a little better, paid $8K for the PSA 3. And now it's currently going for about $20K, so 2.5x on the 51 Bowman mantle. The Luka Doncic got 2 of them at $1,500 a piece, and they're currently going for about $8,000 a piece, so roughly a 5x plus return on the Doncic. The Dr. J was a big hit, paid $5,000 for it back in January 2020. As of April 2021, goes for, we'll say $41,000, although you could argue it's even higher here, but $41,000, so that's about an 8x return on Dr. J. And the Wayne Gretzky bought 2 of them, 2 PSA 8s at $4,000 a piece. And as of April 2021, they currently go for about $22,000 a piece, we'll say. So yeah, another 5x plus return on the Gretzky. So overall, totally crushed round 1 here. The Jordan and the LeBron were definitely the biggest winners. I should have gone heavier on those 2 guys. But every card went up significantly. The 52 mantle was actually the worst performing card here. It's the only card that didn't at least double. Everything else doubled and then some, with some cards being as high as 10x, and overall made $806,000. So more than 8xing the initial investment from round 1. Now a bunch of you will mention, and you're right, that if I were to actually sell these cards, there will be some seller fees. So let's factor that in. I mean, we want this hypothetical situation where I travel back in time to be as realistic as possible. So we'll say I sold them through an auction house and there were roughly 10% seller fees. So I have to factor in $80,000 in costs. So I really made $726,000. Now I should also mention that when I sold the cards, I celebrated by throwing myself a massive party. Went absolutely reckless with spending on it. $31,000 I spent on this incredible party. I'd give you the details, but I'm sworn to secrecy. And this obviously will affect my bottom line. But YOLO, totally worth it. All right, so for round 2, I had to be a little more strategic. Round 1 was easy because basically just every key card was going way up in 2020, so just had to focus on the key cards. But that wasn't the case in after the peak in early 2021. That was no longer the case, so I had to focus more on individual players, who I think went way up over a certain stretch. So I decided for my buy date to be for round 2 to be January 1, 2023. And then my sell date was basically present day, July 1, 2025. So a 2.5-year window. And I tried to pick players who I thought obviously are worth a whole lot more today than they were 2.5 years ago. Shohei Ohtani was one example. Now with these active players, mainly active players, they don't have really expensive cards that transact a lot. So I had to sort of go with the more, for the sake of this experiment, had to go more with their like standard cards. For the Ohtani, for example, I went this 2018 Topps Chrome Refractor Rookie in a PSA 10. So on my buy date, January 1, 2023, it was selling for around around $350, I estimated, based on the sales right around that date. And I decided to buy 400 copies of this card. Now, I know you probably could not just go out and buy 400 copies of this card, but basically 400 copies of this card or a similar type Shohei Ohtani card with this value. Another player I chose was Aaron Judge. I figured he has to be worth a whole lot more than 2.5 years ago, although both Ohtani and Judge were already significant stars 2.5 years ago. So I wasn't that confident that there would be a huge rise, but I figured they both clearly had to be more valuable today than 2.5 years ago. Aaron Judge, 2017 Topps Chrome Refractor Rookie in a PSA 10. This was going for about $250 or so in January 1, 2023. And I decided to buy 500 copies of this card or something similar. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander seemed like an obvious one to me. 2018 Panini Prizm, Silver Prizm PSA 10. Back in January 2023, it was selling for something like $400 or so. And I decided to buy 500 copies of this. I figured this one actually had a good chance to spike quite a bit. And in football, I really struggled to come up with someone. I was trying to think of a quarterback who is like obviously a lot more valuable today than 2.5 years ago. And it seems like there would be a bunch, but I just couldn't come up with. I mean, most of the star quarterbacks were already kind of overhyped and valued 2.5 years ago. Think of Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. These guys were already really expensive 2.5 years ago. And the young guys were expensive right out of the gate, the CJ Strouds and the Jaden Daniels. So I didn't think there was a good quarterback option. If somebody thinks of one, please leave it in the comments. But I went with Derrick Henry, thinking he probably is worth a whole lot more today than he was 2.5 years ago because of his incredible season, last season. So 2016 Panini Prizm, Silver Prizm, Derrick Henry rookie PSA 10. This card was selling for about $250 in January 2021, and I bought 200 copies of the Derrick Henry or something similar. Now I had to include at least one vintage card, but I couldn't come up with any vintage cards that like obviously went way up in the last 2.5 years. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I was trying to come up with something like maybe a player who made the Hall of Fame, and I just couldn't come up with anything sort of obvious. I'm sure a lot of the vintage key cards you sort of trickled up over the last couple of years, but we're not looking for trickle up in this hypothetical. We're looking to break the bank here. So the Ken McMullen rookie struck me as something I think is worth a whole lot more because he does share the card with Pete Rose, and Pete Rose was in the news quite a bit, and something told me that this card has gone way up in the last 2.5 years. So I added to the portfolio a PSA Mint 9 Ken McMullen rookie featuring Pete Rose. And back in early 2023, the card was selling for roughly $80,000. So yeah, added one of those to the portfolio. And sort of at the end of the process, I remember that Lionel Messi cards shot way up when he signed in the MLS. So I figured I'd add some Lionel Messi. Focused on his most famous card, the 2004 Panini Mega Cracks Lionel Messi rookie. I couldn't afford a PSA 10 at this point, but a PSA 9s back in early 2023 going for about $20,000. So I added 5 of those to the portfolio, spending $100,000 on Lionel Messi. So this is the entirety of the portfolio for round 2. 6 different players really here. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Derrick Henry, Lionel Messi, and a Ken McMullen rookie featuring Pete Rose. I can see a lot of copies, obviously, of some of them, but yeah, basically 6 different cards. Here's the chart showing that I spent $695,000 on these cards, and obviously I didn't really do that. Again, this is just a hypothetical for anyone wondering if I did really time travel. I did not. All right, let's see how we did. Shohei Ohtani, remember, bought 400 copies at $350 each. Today they sell for about 800, so a little over double, a little over 2x on the Shohei Ohtani. Aaron Judge paid $250 a piece, and they sell for about 500 today, maybe a little bit more, so about 2x return on Aaron Judge. The Shai Gilgeous-Alexander bought these at 400, and today they sell for about 1,000. Maybe you could argue a little higher, but we'll say 1,000. So 2.5x return on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Derrick Henry, which we bought at $250 a piece, today really sells for about $250. So essentially, no money made on the Derrick Henry. That was a poor choice to include him in the portfolio. Pete Rose / Ken McMullen paid $80,000 for the PSA 9, and yeah, the last sale was for $80,000. So no profit made on the Ken McMullen / Pete Rose rookie. And Lionel Messi was a little bit better. Paid $20,000 for them, and today 5 copies today they sell for about $60,000. So about 3x return on the Lionel Messi's. So here are the results for round 2. Turned $695,000 into $1.5 million. I mean, that's really not a great result, to be honest. 2.5 years where you know what's going to happen, and I barely doubled my money. I think I probably could have done a whole lot better if I had spent a little more time on it. But yeah, $1.5 million. I'm a millionaire now. I will take it. But that's it. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And now that I'm a millionaire, would love to hear people's thoughts as to what sort of party I should throw this time. And would love to hear what I missed. What would you have done? What cards would you have bought? I'm sure there's lots of ones that would have done much better than some of the options I picked. But appreciate everyone watching as always, and eat your vegetables. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.